Let's talk about elevations in your Revit project. So elevations are basically projections of a side of a building. There are different types of elevations. There are building elevations, enlarged elevations, interior elevations. We're mostly focused on building elevations, and if you go into your views, you can see that under elevations, you have a building elevation type here. This is associated with the family of elevations, which we'll look at in a second. And each of these are sheeted, so you can see east through south here are sheeted on this composition sheet. Each of these elevations is associated with what's called an elevation marker. Now, if I go into a plan, I'm going to double click into this first floor plan here, and I'm going to turn on my crop region so that I can see the extents. I'm actually going to expand this a bit, and what you can see are these arrows that pop up. And these arrows are our elevation markers. So the first thing to keep in mind is that if you have a view and you've cropped out the crop region or where the elevation is being taken from, you won't be able to see the elevation marker. If I hover over one of these elements, you can see that there is a square. Sometimes this is a circle. And this is basically the host for all of the elevations. If I, not all of the elevations, but this particular elevation over here. If I click that square, you can see I can actually create new elevations, and they'll pop up here under the elevation section. And I can also delete them, but it will prompt me that, hey, I'm deleting this. You can't really undo this very easily. So I'm going to just undo that for now. You can move this around, this square. So if you click and you move, or you click and drag, this is just changing the location of the tag itself. So this is more of the annotation. It's just sort of a lines on a page. It doesn't really represent any sort of scope box or anything for this elevation, because multiple elevations can be hosted on it. Now if we hover over the arrow itself, you can see there's a number associated with it, and the way that this family works is it's showing us the page and the detail number. So the detail number is 1 and the sheet number is 01. If I go to sheets, you see 01. So that's why we're seeing 1.01. You might rename your sheets. You might change them to A01, so this would be 1.A01. And this might also not be the first view. So you can see these other ones have 5, 6, and 4. Elevations work somewhat similarly to floor plans, but they're a little bit simpler, especially in the data that they convey. Now if I select that arrow, you can see that we're looking at a view here. This is view name East, and we're looking at the east facade of the building. Again, Revit's not going to auto-create this for you. It doesn't know that this is, you're going to want to call this East, so you might have to manually rename this East. Whenever you click that arrow, you can see this blue line starts to show up, and this is the basically the cut line of where you're going to take your elevation. So it also creates this sort of blue scope box here, and those are the extents of your crop region. So here you can see the elevation associated with it. It's east. And if I pull the drag extents in, you can see that that building goes away. And if I pull the crop extents in, you can see the tower starts to get cropped out. So I'll redo that here. So keep in mind, if you're not seeing something on an elevation, it's probably because it's not within the crop extents. You can also actually drag this to cut through the building, but you shouldn't use an elevation tag for this. You should use a section. So I'm going to undo that and drag it in. So I mentioned there's different types of elevations, and that you really only need to be paying attention to the building elevations, but the different types associate with different tag types. So if you want this arrow to change its graphics, you'll actually have to change the family type to something else. So in your family, or in your project, you can see that we already have loaded this 3/8 inch gray line, and if I change it to that, two things will change. One, we'll see that the elevation marker is changing, and two, that the category of the elevation is changing to this gray line subcategory. So it works a little bit different in floor plans in that they're not all categorized together. We're starting to individualize them. I can also change this to something like an interior elevation. You can see a more radical change in the elevation marker. I'll go over how to change this elevation marker a little bit more in depth in another tutorial, but the basics are that you actually have to edit the type and edit the graphical callouts here. To create a new elevation, you go to View, under Elevation, under the Create panel, you want to click Elevation, and you need to be in a view that can host the elevation. So this elevation view is actually being hosted in the first floor plan now. And you can see if we're choosing one of the families that we have already created in the model, the arrow will pop up to tell us that it's trying to create the exact same type. If I change this to interior elevation, you can see it will try and create an interior elevation. Let's go back to 0 gray arrows here, and if I hover over a side of the building, you can see that Revit is trying to help you in the process of creating this elevation. So because this is a building information modeler, it knows that you're creating a building, and so it's trying to associate with the most logical elevation that you're going to create. So let's place one here, and you can see once I've done that, this elevation 1A pops up. And it's not sheeted, so there are no numbers associated with it. And if we click the elevation marker, we can see that there are some parameters that we can change about it. So I'm going to double click the arrow or double click this to go into the elevation and tab my windows to see how we can affect this. So one thing I can do is I can change the scale. Again, you can see that it's not necessarily changing in model size, but if I were to sheet this, it would change. So let's change this back to 1/16 of an inch. I can also change the crop extents either to a scope box, or I can manually edit them here or in the plan view. So again, it's easiest probably to start here where we can crop it down basically to our site. Then we can go to the elevation view and see the crop extents here, and we can bring it down below the roof. We can refine it even more if we want, and we can bring the bottom of the crop extents up. Here you're seeing that I'm not actually able to see this part of the building beyond, so what I'm going to do is select the display in this view. I'm going to select the elevation in this view, and I'm going to click the drag extents here. And you can see that the far clip offset has also changed. Sometimes it's nice to change this to a nice clean number, so I'm going to type 70 feet, and it will associate with a 70-foot long clipping offset. Now, very often your elevations will be taken very close to your building, so there's no sort of topography interruption. I'm not restricting you to that, but do note that if you are taking your elevations far away from your plan and your crop region is cutting them out, you'll see that they start to disappear. They're not gone, they're still in the project, it's just that the annotation is not going to show up because this floor plan doesn't contain its the extents of that views the extents of that elevation. So let me go into this elevation here, and I can actually click and drag, and you can see that some of that topography went away. And now if we crop this down, we can actually see that we can go beyond the arrow as long as we're not going beyond the crop scope. The last thing we'll do here is go to the elevation view that we just created. We can name it Elevation East. You can see that in my project browser it's been renamed, and I'll apply a view template to it.